Top 6. Rock legends who hated Ritchie Blackmore. Ritchie Blackmore, born Richard Hugh Blackmore on April 14, 1945, in Weston-super-Mare, England, is one of rock's most influential guitarists. Known for his technical mastery, unique blend of classical and hard rock styles, and intense stage presence, he first gained fame as a founding member of Deep Purple in 1968. His iconic riffs in songs like Smoke on the Water and Highway Star helped define hard rock and heavy metal. In 1975, Blackmore left Deep Purple to form Rainbow, where he explored more melodic and medieval-inspired rock, collaborating with legendary vocalists like Ronnie James Dio. Later in life, he shifted towards folk and Renaissance music with his band Blackmore's Night, showcasing his versatility and enduring creativity. Throughout his career, Ritchie Blackmore has remained a mysterious, uncompromising artist whose influence continues to inspire generations of guitarists worldwide. Gillan and Blackmore, Clash of Egos. Following the towering success of Deep Purple in the early 1970s, tensions began to bubble beneath the surface, particularly between vocalist Ian Gillan and guitarist Ritchie Blackmore. While both were brilliant in their own right, their artistic visions and personalities often collided. Gillan, known for his free-spirited nature and powerful voice, valued camaraderie and a democratic approach to band decisions. Blackmore, on the other hand, was more controlling in his musical direction, preferring a meticulous, almost dictatorial style in the studio and on stage. One of Gillan's biggest grievances was Blackmore's unpredictable behavior during live performances. Blackmore's tendency to change set lists without notice, or to extend solos far beyond rehearsal length, frustrated Gillan, who felt it disrupted the band's cohesion. The vocalist also disliked Blackmore's frequent mood swings, which could turn rehearsals into tense, unproductive sessions. Creative differences further deepened the rift. Gillan wanted to explore a broader range of rock influences, sometimes leaning toward blues or experimental sounds, while Blackmore insisted on a heavier, more riff-driven approach. This tug-of-war over Deep Purple's direction led to arguments that sometimes spilled into the press, fueling fan speculation. Adding to the friction were personal misunderstandings. Gillan often felt that Blackmore was distant and dismissive, rarely engaging in offstage camaraderie. Meanwhile, Blackmore reportedly saw Gillan as too undisciplined and resistant to his vision. Their mutual resentment reached its peak during the Who Do We Think We Are sessions in 1973, a period Gillan later described as pure misery. Ultimately, these compounded issues led to Gillan's departure from Deep Purple in mid-1973. Although the two would reunite years later, the scars from that era never fully healed. To this day, Gillan has been candid in interviews about his inability to work long-term with Blackmore, citing the guitarist's controlling nature and volatile personality as the main reasons for their strained relationship. Clapton versus Blackmore, guitar clash. Coming off the back of his deep respect for many fellow guitarists of the 1960s and 1970s, Eric Clapton was never shy about voicing his opinions, both praise and criticism. While Clapton admired technical skill, musicality, and authenticity, he reportedly had little affection for Ritchie Blackmore, the virtuoso behind Deep Purple and Rainbow. The core of Clapton's distaste wasn't about denying Blackmore's ability. Rather, it was rooted in the vastly different philosophies they had toward guitar playing, stagecraft, and the spirit of rock music. Clapton, raised on a steady diet of blues, always approached the guitar as an emotional extension of himself, favoring feel over flash. To him, music was about storytelling, space, and the raw honesty of the blues tradition. Blackmore, while undeniably brilliant, often leaned into a highly theatrical and sometimes deliberately abrasive stage persona, filled with elaborate solos, showmanship, and an almost competitive edge in his playing. To Clapton, this veered too close to performance for performance's sake, sacrificing the emotional core in favor of spectacle. Personality differences also played a role. Clapton, despite his own rock star fame, often preferred a more understated public image, valuing camaraderie among musicians. Blackmore, in contrast, was infamous for his aloofness, temperamental behavior, and sometimes combative interactions with both bandmates and other artists. Clapton reportedly found such behavior alienating and counterproductive to the collaborative spirit of music. There was also the matter of musical direction. Clapton's career was built on blending blues, rock, and touches of jazz in a way that felt organic. Blackmore's brand of hard rock and proto-metal, while innovative, embraced a level of aggression and precision that Clapton didn't connect with artistically. Interviews over the years have hinted at Clapton's skepticism toward music that felt overly calculated or too tightly controlled, traits he believed were present in Blackmore's approach. The few times their paths crossed publicly, there was little warmth between the two. While Clapton refrained from open personal attacks, he made it clear through subtle comments that he didn't consider Blackmore among his circle of admired guitarists. For Clapton, it wasn't a matter of rivalry, but of differing values. One prized emotional truth. The other, at least in Clapton's eyes, prized technical dominance and theatricality. In the end, Clapton's dislike of Ritchie Blackmore serves as a reminder that even among the pantheon of legendary guitarists, deep divides can exist, not over skill, but over what the art of guitar truly means. Glenn Hughes versus Ritchie Blackmore, coming on the heels of other high-profile tensions within Deep Purple. The relationship between Glenn Hughes and Ritchie Blackmore stands out as one of the band's most infamous personal riffs. When Hughes joined Deep Purple in 1973, bringing his soulful voice, funky bass lines, and enthusiasm for blending rock with R&B, he entered a band already dominated by Blackmore's creative vision. From the start, the chemistry was uneasy. One of the primary reasons for Hughes's dislike of Blackmore was the guitarist's controlling nature. Blackmore had a reputation for steering Deep Purple's musical direction toward his own preferences, often dismissing or undermining contributions that didn't align with his vision. Hughes, who thrived on collaboration and experimentation, felt creatively stifled. This tension intensified during the recording of Stormbringer, 1974, where Hughes and David Coverdale pushed for a funkier, more soulful sound, something Blackmore openly resented, viewing it as a departure from the band's hard rock identity. Personality differences were another source of conflict. Hughes was exuberant, outgoing, and often injected humor into the studio and stage environment. Blackmore, in contrast, was moody, secretive, and quick to withdraw if things didn't go his way. Hughes has recalled in interviews how Blackmore would deliberately isolate himself, avoiding eye contact or conversation for days, creating a tense atmosphere that wore down band morale. On a deeper level, Hughes also took issue with Blackmore's tendency toward manipulation. Band politics in Deep Purple were notoriously complex, and Blackmore knew how to leverage alliances and subtle power plays to maintain his influence. Hughes, who valued straightforwardness, saw this as unnecessary drama that distracted from the music. Things came to a head during live performances. Hughes, known for his energetic stage presence and willingness to improvise, often clashed with Blackmore's more calculated and controlled approach. In some cases, Blackmore would even cut off Hughes's moments in the spotlight or alter set lists without warning, reinforcing the sense that this was Blackmore's band rather than a true collective. By 1975, the relationship had deteriorated to the point where Blackmore decided to leave Deep Purple altogether, forming Rainbow shortly thereafter. While Hughes did not publicly celebrate his departure, he has since admitted that the band dynamic became far more open and collaborative without Blackmore's dominating presence. Over the years, Hughes has occasionally softened his tone, acknowledging Blackmore's immense talent, but the underlying tension from their time together remains a defining chapter in both men's careers. Ultimately, Glenn Hughes's disdain for Ritchie Blackmore stemmed from a fundamental mismatch. One was a free-spirited musician seeking creative exchange. The other, a brilliant but autocratic leader determined to shape the music in his own image. Their clash was less about ability and more about the eternal struggle between collaboration and control in rock's most combustible bands. Dio versus Blackmore, creative fallout. Coming off the heels of Ritchie Blackmore's contentious exits from Deep Purple, his collaboration with Ronnie James Dio and Rainbow initially seemed like a perfect meeting of minds. In 1975, when Blackmore left Deep Purple to form his own band, he sought a vocalist with a powerful, mystical presence, someone who could bring his vision of medieval-inspired hard rock to life. Dio, then fronting Elf, fit the bill perfectly. The early years of Rainbow were marked by a unique chemistry. Blackmore's dark, intricate guitar work paired seamlessly with Dio's soaring, operatic vocals and mythic lyricism. Together, they produced albums like Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, 1975, Rising, 1976, and Long Live Rock and Roll, 1978, which are still revered as milestones in hard rock and proto-metal. But beneath the surface, cracks began to form. The seeds of Dio's eventual dislike for Blackmore were planted in the guitarist's authoritarian control over the band, while Dio was the primary lyricist and a crucial part of Rainbow's identity. Blackmore made it clear that Rainbow was his band, and everyone else was replaceable. Dio, who prided himself on artistic integrity, began to feel that his contributions were being overshadowed or undervalued. One major source of tension was Blackmore's shift in musical direction. After Long Live Rock and Roll, he grew tired of the fantasy and medieval themes that had defined Rainbow's early work, pushing instead for a more commercial, radio-friendly sound. Dio, however, believed those themes were central to Rainbow's magic and resisted watering down their identity. This ideological clash became a point of no return, as Blackmore increasingly sought singers and bandmates who would accommodate his evolving vision, while Dio refused to compromise on what he saw as the essence of their music. Their personalities also clashed in fundamental ways. Blackmore's mercurial, often reclusive nature frustrated Dio, who valued open communication and camaraderie within a band. Dio has recalled instances where Blackmore would disappear for hours or even days without explanation, leaving the rest of the group in limbo. In interviews, Dio described Blackmore as brilliant but unpredictable, capable of inspiring greatness one moment and creating chaos the next. The breaking point came in 1978. After completing Long Live Rock and Roll, Blackmore decided to replace much of the band, keeping only drummer Cozy Powell. Dio saw this as a betrayal, not just to himself, but to the unity they had built, feeling alienated and unwilling to bend to Blackmore's new direction. Dio left Rainbow. The split was far from amicable, with Dio later saying that while he respected Blackmore's talent, working with him was like walking on eggshells every single day. In the years that followed, the feud simmered. Dio went on to join Black Sabbath and launch a hugely successful solo career, while Blackmore took Rainbow into a more mainstream rock direction. In interviews, Dio often spoke candidly about Blackmore's difficult personality, calling him one of the greatest guitar players in the world, but also one of the most frustrating people you could ever meet. Despite the bitterness, Dio never denied the magic they had created together in Rainbow's early years. In a way, his dislike for Blackmore was rooted in disappointment, the sense that their creative partnership could have lasted much longer if ego, control, and clashing visions hadn't gotten in the way. Their collaboration remains a classic example of how two musical geniuses can produce brilliance together, yet be unable to coexist in the long run. Townshin versus Blackmore, rock clash. Coming off the heels of the publicized tensions between Ritchie Blackmore and other rock legends like Ronnie James Dio, there was another figure in the British rock pantheon who, while never sharing a band with him, had little love for the enigmatic guitarist, Pete Townshend of The Who. Their animosity wasn't born out of personal betrayal or shared stage disasters, but rather from a deep clash in personality, musical values, and professional interactions over the years. Townshend, known for his explosive guitar-smashing theatrics, conceptual songwriting, and sharp wit, had little patience for what he saw as Blackmore's aloof arrogance and rigid control over the musicians he worked with. The two first crossed paths in the early 1970s, when Deep Purple and The Who occasionally found themselves on the same festival bills. Townshend, who thrived on the idea of rock as a living, breathing form of storytelling, found Blackmore's approach cold and overly calculated. Blackmore, in contrast, was notorious for his perfectionism and often icy demeanor toward fellow musicians, even those he wasn't directly working with. This created a subtle but growing friction between them. One of the earliest sparks of hostility came from a backstage incident at a festival in 1972. According to people present, Townshend had attempted to strike up a conversation about the state of British rock, only to be met with Blackmore's dismissive one-word replies and eventual silent departure. To Townshend, this wasn't just rudeness, it was an insult, a refusal to engage as equals in the musical community. From that point, Townshend's opinion of Blackmore began to solidify into something more personal. But their biggest philosophical difference lay in what rock music should be. Townshend saw it as an evolving narrative art form, one that could carry political and emotional weight. Blackmore, while a master technician, often seemed to Townshend to treat rock as a vehicle for his own virtuosity rather than a shared cultural conversation. Townshend would later remark in an interview that Blackmore's style, while technically brilliant, felt hermetically sealed, like he's playing to himself, not to the world. There was also the matter of control. Townshend, as the principal creative force in The Who, understood the need for leadership in a band, but he also valued collaborative spirit. Blackmore's history of hiring and firing bandmates at will and reshaping Rainbow's lineup repeatedly was something Townshend considered toxic for artistic growth. In Townshend's view, music flourished when musicians were allowed to challenge one another creatively, not when they were constantly walking on eggshells around a bandleader's ego. Their paths crossed again in the late 1970s during a charity event discussion where several rock icons were approached to contribute performances. Townshend reportedly balked when told Blackmore might be involved, telling organizers he had no interest in sharing a stage with someone he described as a black hole of joy. That remark, though said offhand, eventually made its way into the music press and fueled the narrative of mutual dislike. Interestingly, Blackmore never publicly engaged in a prolonged feud with Townshend, but he didn't go out of his way to hide his disinterest either. In one interview, when asked about The Who's guitarist, Blackmore simply said, "He's not my cup of tea." before changing the subject. For Townshin, this reinforced his view that Blackmore existed in a self-contained bubble, unwilling to embrace the wider rock community. Ultimately, the reasons behind Townshin's dislike for Blackmore weren't about a single incident, but rather years of accumulated impressions, an initial cold shoulder, incompatible artistic philosophies, and a sense that Blackmore's genius was undercut by an unwillingness to engage as a true peer. Townshin, who built his career on both raw emotional honesty and collaborative chaos, simply couldn't connect with someone he saw as closed off and dictatorial. In a way, their strained relationship serves as a microcosm of the broader divides in 1970s rock. On one side were musicians like Townshin, who embraced messiness, spontaneity, and the communal spirit of performance. On the other were figures like Blackmore, whose genius was sharpened by precision, control, and personal mystique. Both approaches created timeless music, but when these worlds collided, mutual respect was often in short supply. The lasting impact of Blackmore, following the controversies and rivalries that marked his career, Ritchie Blackmore's personal legacy remains defined by his unparalleled guitar mastery, genre-blending creativity, and uncompromising vision. From revolutionizing hard rock with Deep Purple to pioneering neoclassical rock with Rainbow, his influence can be felt in generations of guitarists who cite him as a key inspiration. Beyond his technical skill, Blackmore's mystique, equal parts brilliance and defiance, has secured his place as one of rock's most enigmatic icons. His music continues to bridge past and present, proving that true artistry transcends time. Ritchie Blackmore's life lessons, following the legacy he left behind. Ritchie Blackmore's story teaches us the importance of staying true to one's artistic vision, even in the face of criticism or conflict. His career proves that innovation often requires defying trends and refusing to compromise on creativity. Blackmore's journey reminds us that real influence comes not from pleasing everyone, but from crafting work that endures and inspires future generations. Like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing rock legend stories.